Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Zoo to You. I'm in a really loud part of the zoo today, so please let us know if you have any trouble hearing us during this video. We are on the Caribbean coast, and today I would like to introduce you to our American flamingos. So we have a large group of flamingos here, and if we have any guesses as to how many, any estimations, please let us know and we can answer that question at the end of the chat. So a question that we do get a lot is, what is the difference between American flamingos and Caribbean flamingos? And it's a great question because, in fact, they're the same thing. So we have American flamingos, also known as Caribbean flamingos, and American flamingos can be found throughout the Caribbean. So there are breeding populations in Cuba, Mexico, Venezuela, Bonaire, the British Virgin Islands, and the Bahamas. So the question remains, are American flamingos found in North America? Were they originally also in North America? And as it turns out, American flamingos were native to Florida, but they disappeared from the state at around the turn of the 20th century. So until about 1900, there were flocks of flamingos that would fly from the Bahamas to Florida Bay, which is now the Everglades National Park. But then, unfortunately, about 1925, people started having colonies of flamingos in human care because they were no longer found in the wild, and they started slowly releasing them. So most of the flamingos that you see in Florida today perhaps were escapees from some of those places, but there is some evidence that some American flamingos in Florida have arrived on their own from outside of the state. So they even migrated there, and now they're considered protected under the Federal Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So they're generally considered to be non-migratory, but they are strong flyers, as you might be able to see if you come to our exhibit here. And they can cross large distances in search of food or new reproductive opportunities, new places to breed, and they can be found in new places throughout the Caribbean. So, as you probably have been hearing and noticing, our American flamingos have a lot of different ways that they communicate with one another. So you can hear all these different sounds. You might be able to see some different body languages in the way that they communicate with one another. And sometimes, as you see in front of you, you'll even see some of them starting to do a behavior, and there might be others that follow. So I'd love to go through some of these behaviors with you and kind of spell out some of the things that we've been noticing. So what you just saw was called a wing salute. You can see that the wings are spread for a few seconds. You see that beautiful flash of color. You see some of those black feathers, which you don't always see inside of their wings. And this is often accompanied by a bit of a twist. You can see some of them are honking. They can be very loud with one another. Sometimes they'll have a wing stretch and a leg stretch at the same time. It's like a flamingo yoga move. So they'll stretch their wing out, they'll stretch their leg out. You might see some of them are preening. So preening is a way, you might see one in the back is doing some preening. And so preening is a way that different birds that live in the water help keep themselves waterproof. So ducks will do this. They basically have an oil gland at the base of their tail, and with their beaks they spread this oil throughout their feathers, and it helps keep them nice and dry and nice and waterproof. So preening is really useful behavior, and it's something that all water birds have to do to stay nice and healthy. So they use that beak to spread that oil throughout their feathers, and they'll twist. We also have head flagging. That might be something that I haven't really seen very often here, but essentially they'll put their head way high up in the air, and then they'll quickly move their head side to side. Almost looks a little bit like a flag. Sometimes you'll see head shaking. They'll be having a bent neck, and they'll wiggle their head from side to side. And then sometimes, if they're all getting together as a group, they'll even march, and they'll all go in one direction together. And then last but not least, you'll even see some bowing. So sometimes they'll stretch their neck down. You might even see some flamingos that are doing this at the moment. And they might even open their wings a little bit. So these are all some of the physical behaviors that we see. And the next time that you come to Stone Zoo, if you see some of these, maybe you and a buddy can try and imitate them and pretend to be a flock of flamingos together. So we're hearing a lot of different sounds. This honking noise that you're hearing is really important to flamingos. It helps keep them all together, helps communicate things within the group. You can hear some gabbling noises. And so people have studied them in human care, and they've noticed a couple different sounds. They've got kind of the repetitive honking sound, almost a buzzing sound, and so we're still coming to learn a lot about all these different sounds and how they communicate, but coming to observe them in a place like Stone Zoo is a really great way to learn about them. And then last but not least, a behavior that I would love to mention, and something that I have gotten a question about, is if you look at some of the flamingos' heads, they have their beaks almost in the water. And so some of them will have their beaks in the water, and they'll be essentially swishing their beak back and forth, and it's a way for them to eat. So I've gotten questions in the past from guests that are concerned they're cold or shivering, but that way that they're shaking their beak, they're actually moving their tongue very quickly in their mouths, and they're essentially pushing the water through their beak. Their beak has like a comb-like structure on the inside, similar to how whales will filter their food when they're swimming through the water and they get all that krill. In the wild, they'll be eating little tiny algae and shrimp and crustaceans, and all of these things have a pink pigment in it called carotenoid, which is the same thing that is in foods like carrots and beets, and it's what turns the flamingos pink. So it's another reason that if we eat a lot of carrots, this might be one of the reasons that our hands can sometimes turn orange if we eat a lot of carrots. So aside from watching their behavior on a group-like scale, if you're watching them all together, you might notice that some of the flamingos have bands on their legs, and it can be a great way to start to tell them apart. So I have a cheat sheet with me, but I've come to learn some of the flamingos' names, but I'll give you a tip to start. So all the female flamingos have yellow bands on their legs, and all of the male flamingos have green bands on their legs, and all of them have their own numbers. So, for example, one of our oldest flamingos is number 28. So she has a yellow band, and she has number 28. And so she might be a little bit difficult to find at the moment, but believe it or not, she is 42 years old, and her name is Kelly. And then in a similar vein, we also have a male who is a similar age as well. He has a green band on his leg with the number 7 on it, and he is slightly younger than Kelly, but he is also 42 years old. So the next time that you come to flamingos and come to visit them, and if you see a staff member like myself and would like to learn some of these names that we have for the flamingos, there are some really silly names. One of my favorites being Marquis de Flapayette, who is a male with the band number 35. It can be a great way to get to know them on a personal level. And so over time, maybe you'll be able to notice that a certain flamingo likes to preen a lot, or a certain flamingo likes to honk a lot. And it can be a really great way to get to know them on a more personal level. So with that, I will check our chat and see if anyone has any questions about our American flamingos.
A lot of questions that we get, especially in the winter time, is what are those flamingos doing out in the snow? I was wondering if you'd be able to speak to that at all.
Absolutely. That's a great question. I did actually have a guest who was very concerned about the flamingos, seeing them out in the cold, because it did look like they were shaking, but they were eating, as I said before. But these flamingos have something that we can't see, but it helps keep them really warm. It's something called counter-current heat exchange. And basically, their arteries and their veins in their legs are located really close together, so they're able to exchange body heat in a really efficient way. Basically, that warm blood from their body, as it goes into their legs, it cools up the blood that's coming back into their bodies. So believe it or not, they're able to stay warm even on a snowy winter day, although we will bring them inside if the weather gets too cold.
Awesome. And then how many flamingos are there in here?
Oh, that is a great question. We have 48 flamingos here. So quite a flamboyance is what I should be calling them. A group of flamingos is called a flamboyance because they are so colorful.
And then lastly, I feel like a lot of people tend to ask, what are those ducks doing in here? So so I wanted to just take a moment and highlight them as well, as people will see them this summer.
Yes, those are our golden eyes, and they're a great addition, not as perhaps as appreciated as the really colorful neighbors, but they're certainly a good one to look out for. So, with that, I'll bid you adieu. Please come by and check out our flock, maybe get to know their names, and learn a little bit more about our American flamingos. I'll see you soon.